Hello, and welcome to this live stream production from Cafe Lena, the historic listening room in Saratoga Springs, New York. Today's free stream is made possible by the generous support of the Sarah B. Folk Charitable Fund, as well as by the Adirondack Trust Company Community Fund, Kevin and Claudia Bright, Polly Set, and our Virtuoso and Lifetime members. You can watch past episodes of this series on youtube.com/cafelena. To learn more about our nonprofit venue and programs, please visit cafelena.org. Enjoy your front row seats for this event, live from Cafe Lena.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Art of Community. We're at Cafe Lena on stage here with a whole bunch of us. For those of you who are regular viewers of this series, you'll know that we're doing something a little bit different today. This is a wonderful project that we're going to talk about called Youth Squared. So before we start the conversation, I just want to thank the Chamber of Commerce, Saratoga County Chamber of Commerce, for helping to spread the word about this. And for the Adirondack Trust Company, which underwrites the coffee and cookies, which is sitting out on the table there and also helps to spread the word. So everybody on this stage is going to do a little bit of talking about their involvement in the social impact sector here in Saratoga. And before the youth start talking, I want to ask a couple of questions of Beverly Lazar Davis, who is the founder of this project, this amazing, unique project called Youth Squared. And so Beverly, why don't you just start by saying briefly what Youth Squared is?
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, Sarah, for asking us to be part of this event and to spread the word. Youth Squared is an organization, I don't know if I can back up a little bit in terms of sharing how it came to be, sure. But about 60 years ago, there were no cell phones and no computers, no video games, and there seemed to be more of a sense of community. So it was part of my adolescent culture to be a volunteer. So when I was 13, I volunteered as a candy striper at Abbott Northwestern Hospital in Minneapolis, and I provided fresh water and flowers to patients and brought them to their x-ray appointments. And I realized that after putting in over 500 hours of service that I became really familiar with working alongside medical professionals and working on a hospital campus. And years later, I came to realize how much that shaped my career. And so Youth Squared was born 20 years ago on my 50th birthday when I wanted to give back to our community and I wanted to encourage the community service of youth. So its main mission is to get youth involved in social action and uniquely to give seed monies and guidance for youth to design their own social action projects and learn leadership skills along the way.
That is, it's quite a thing. What are some kind of bumps in the road that you hit when you were trying to start it?
There weren't that many obstacles in the beginning. And it's interesting because in the beginning, it was kind of a twinkle of a project where youth from the community up to age 22 could write a grant, come and present it, and get money and guidance to do their project. So that was very easy for the board to be able to receive. When COVID came, we kind of changed our level of activity, and we began active projects coming from the board. And sometimes, because our board is made up of mostly youth, and third adults and 2/3 youth, and sometimes we take on projects that are really big. So the obstacles come with the intensity of doing a bigger project, and we find many other hands to help and are very planful, and there are youth leaders that take a big chunk of responsibility, and so.
Sure, I can see how that would work. You know, people just pulling on their own social networks and pulling new people in that way. But was it hard to explain what you were doing, or did you have teenagers coming up to you right out of the gate saying, "I have a project I want to work on"? Because I think that it takes a little. People don't see themselves as the agents of social change when they're adults, never mind when they're young. You know, a lot of people don't think of themselves as the person on the mic telling the story, or the person coming up with the project and going out and making it happen. Did you have trouble finding those initial projects, or was there pent-up demand?
Actually, I'm smiling because the first 10 youth that were on the board were handpicked. There were people in the community that did a lot of community service, and they were noted in newspapers, and we knew about them through school clubs or whatever. And so that's how it started, and then they were able to talk to other friends about being a part of the board. As far as projects go, we've given over maybe 66 grants out to people doing amazing projects. And so the key, I think, Sarah, is that in the beginning, and not so much during COVID time, but we did a lot of speaking engagements. So the youth would go out and speak about Youth Squared and what it was, and how other youth could do a grant proposal, ask for money, and do a project. So spread the word that way.
Sure. Yep. Okay. So we have a lot of people to work into the story here, and I'm really eager to get that going. So, Saiba, just could you introduce yourself, maybe tell us a little bit about your project, and what I would love to have you talk about, if you would, is what you learned about managing people and managing a project in the course of doing what you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm Saiba Jessel, and I would say the biggest event that I've probably managed is the Walk for Ukraine, or the Walk with Ukraine. And the biggest lesson that I learned from managing that was that really anybody can make an impact in the community. I know one of the activities that we did in preparation for that event was we had people come in, and ourselves too, and we painted rocks, and we sold them at the event, and that raised, all of the art that we did raised approximately $2,000 for Save the Children, which is the organization we were donating to with that event. And anybody can paint rocks. I mean, that just shows that anybody with no experience in social action or just any age group can make an impact. Yeah.
That's really neat. And that is a great lesson. Were there any challenges that you faced in kind of managing the project that you had to sort of work out?
I mean, I think there were so many people that helped work with that project. There weren't many challenges that I faced in doing that, but I'm sure. I mean, maybe some other people did face challenges, but I think relatively it all went pretty smoothly, and we made the project really fast. Yeah,
How did you come up with the painting rocks idea? That is just fascinating, because I do think that just that probably part of what makes that work is just the handcraft of it, and the sort of personal love that somebody put into it, an object that contains a person's hope almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think actually Bev might have come up with that idea of painting the rocks, and us, whoever was painting them, just came up with ideas of what they wanted to put on the rocks. I know one of the things that I put on the rocks was I did a sunflower field, because sunflower is the flower of Ukraine, and their colors are blue and yellow. So I did a blue sky background and then a sunflower field, And I know those sold really quickly, so I'm glad about that. Yeah.
Well, great idea.
And I just want to add that this was a creative opportunity for the whole board. I mean, we had a lot of different events at the Walk with Ukraine, and they were really creative, and we earned over $8,000 to send to Ukraine.
Fantastic. Wow, Eliza. Yeah, Eliza. Same question for you, really. What was your project, and what did you learn about management along the way?
So my project, my very first project with Youth Squared was a socks and toothbrush drive. And what I learned was kind of just putting on a project of that scale. And what I learned was reaching out to community spaces to put it in like a kind of bustling area where a lot of people were walking in and out, and emailing members of the board to make sure they knew their roles. That was a big part of the whole project, but it was just a good learning experience in leadership.
So communication, clarity of communication, letting people know what you needed from them. And then just putting it out in a public space kind of reflects what Saiba was talking about, which is just, you give people the opportunity to do good things and they will do them. Exactly. That's neat. So how did you let people know that the drive was going on? Like what was your expectation and what was the outcome?
Well, we had a variety of different ways. We had an article written by a member of the board published in the Times-Union, I believe it was. And we also had, I write for the school paper, and so I put a little blurb out in the paper to get the word out to the school community. And so we had a variety of different things like that.
Yep. So socks and toothbrushes for homeless people?
Yes.
And why did that project come to mind?
Well, we were sort of working in conjunction with this other group called Snack Pack, and at that time they had let us know that socks and toothbrushes, although not really necessarily connected, were two things that were needed at that moment. And so working with that group, we were able to collect those.
Socks are so comforting, aren't they?
They are.
There's something kind of special about socks. Like I know that when I was kind of first learning to hike, the teacher that I was hiking with would just say, always bring an extra pair of socks for the end of the hike. You'll be so glad you have them.
Absolutely.
Oh,
One
wow.
of the things that moved you, Eliza, so much is that one of the things that moved you so much was that people were sharing toothbrushes in families during COVID. And so that's why toothbrushes were so important.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So Ella and Luna, I'm going to throw the next question to you. So these are examples of really successful projects, but almost always in the course of our project, there's going to be a moment where maybe you start to feel a little bit overwhelmed. Could you talk a little bit about what you did and if that happened for you?
Yeah, so my name is Ella Daly, and I received a $500 grant from Youth Squared to raise a social awareness about the problem of invasive fish species in New York, which damage our local ecosystem. And this project took the entire school year. It was a very long process, and there was a point where we felt like we've done everything that we could, but the events were yet to come. So there's only so much that you can do at a certain point, and that was very overwhelming because you still have like this feeling that it's incomplete. But talking out with the group members and just lining up the dates and really organizing as a group really helps, especially assigning roles to each other if stuff needs to get done.
So you had like a lot of balls in the air. You started, so talk about some of the elements of the project that you had underway.
Okay, so there are many aspects of our project. First was to raise awareness, and with the $500 grant, we had to design unique tote bags with a slogan that we were going to sell, and then we were going to donate the proceeds to the Natural Heritage Trust, which works to limit invasive species. They operate under the DEI, and we actually scheduled to speak with the head of the DEI who works to limit these species so we could educate ourselves, so we could better educate the community. One of the aspects of our project was organizing, with Beverly's help, a table at the sustainability fair at Skidmore. That was very stressful, but it was well worth all the stress. I am so very happy with how much money we made to donate, because it is such an important issue to preserve our ecosystem for centuries to come.
Wow. And just tell me how that came to be an interest of yours.
Honestly, I wasn't enrolled in this course where it's called STEAM, which just STEM but add art and you get STEAM. I just walked, my friend didn't know where the class was, so I just walked her to the class, but my advisor was the teacher, and then he kind of roped me in. So that was an accident. But then I read about this project, and then as soon as I started researching about these invasive fish, I was in awe about how damaging they are. And another aspect, the academic aspect, is we had to test water samples to find out what specific threats were in our waters.
Wow, that's a big project. And so, do you mind telling me how much you ended up raising?
Yeah, we donated $1,000 to the Natural Heritage Trust.
That's fantastic. I read a book not long ago about invasive species in the Great Lakes. It really is a huge problem that can just upend the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, in the food chain.
Wow. Is there any kind of, there's an overwhelm that can happen when it has to do with, just oh my gosh, I've gotten a lot of people involved here and there are a lot of moving parts. And then it sounds like you just sort of got organized, committed it to paper, and it started to all come together again. There's also an overwhelm that just has to do with the scope of the issue. My God, people are sharing toothbrushes, or the ecosystem is in danger. How do you deal with that?
Deal with the stress of what the world's in. I don't know. I feel like just doing what you can.
Doing what you can, yeah.
What you can do is all you can do, and you gotta hope that others are willing to join the force.
Well, I think you're setting a great example. Okay, Luna. Yeah. So I'd love to hear about your project and just, when the overwhelm set in and what you did about it.
So my name is Luna, and my most recent project was a pop-up, and we collected hygiene supplies and medical supplies, and that was for the backstretch workers at the Saratoga racetrack. And we collected some supplies for the new clinic that is opening, I believe, it might have already opened in May. And so that project I really enjoyed. I've done other pop-ups, so I kind of, I've gotten the ropes, I know what I'm doing. But I think one challenge is just, managing everything, because as a youth leader, you have to, email the organization to see if they have a need. You have to coordinate who's going to volunteer. You have to be at the pop-up. And there's a lot of things you have to do. And I think, I'm a student, I'm an athlete, I have a job outside of school. So I would say, it's definitely hard. But I think that just having, Youth Squared, and, there's always other people that can help you. Although you are the youth leader, you're not alone. I mean, Bev, she's so helpful. If I need her to email someone for me because I have, a test or something like that, she's more than willing to. So I think, people probably think that Youth Squared and being a youth leader is definitely very hard. And, it is, but it's very rewarding. And you also have a lot of people surrounding you and helping you. And I think in the end, it all works out. So although you might feel overwhelmed, and I know I have, but I think that I just know that I don't need to be overwhelmed, and it's work out, it's very rewarding. So I think that's it.
What you're saying is something that's similar to what I've heard a lot of very experienced executive directors say on this stage as part of this series, which is ask for help when you need it and just lean into the resources that are around you. and surround yourself with people who believe in you and are willing to pitch in, you know? And who you surround yourself with is just such an important part of whether or not you can be successful. So, yeah, that's great. How did your project turn out? Did it meet your expectations?
I feel like for every pop-up, I think we're gonna get a good amount of stuff, and then we just get so much. At the end, there was a woman who I believe was a doctor or nurse, and she dropped off like a massive box of medical supplies. And in addition to that, we got so much stuff. And I feel like just every pop-up just blows my expectations. We always get so much stuff. But I think, yeah, I did not expect that much. I never do.
Wow. I mean, like every single person has had as part of their story, put the opportunity in front of people and they will do good things. That's just very heartwarming. All right. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep you on mic for a second because I've got another question for you. And that question is simply, how does this work create the kind of world that you want to live in?
So I think an obvious answer would be, there's a lot of social action and there's a lot of good things that we put out in the community. We're just meeting needs. But I think another part of it is that U Squared definitely addresses a specific need, and that's getting teens involved and younger kids with social action, because we are the future generation and we need to know how to make a change in our community. And although I think that us actually putting the social action is very important, a part of U Squared I really like is that it involves kids, because I don't think a lot of other organizations do it. And I think that you need to teach kids how to make an impact in their community and make a change, because eventually they will be the people teaching other people to make a change. So I think in that part, U Squared is very unique, and I think that that's a very important part of U Squared.
Yeah. That's great. Olivia. So really, tell me a little bit about what your project was, and then also how you feel it helps to create the world that you want to live in.
Yeah, well, I actually headed or helped Bev create an eco-sustainability subcommittee within the organization, and we worked for a very long time on really figuring out how we can kind of implement elements of eco-sustainability within Saratoga. And what we came to was creating compost bins and educational flyers that can be used in any situation, because we found out that it's very hard to compost when you don't have a lot of space. It's very messy. There's a lot of elements going on. And so we felt that if we could bring the composting to these people, like you said, if you present people with the opportunity, they'll do the right thing. And we found that it really helped. We had a lot of moving parts. We had to, contact a lot of organizations and bring it to a lot of fairs. And Bev was the most incredible support for me. But I think that really what it did was it filled a space that we didn't know needed to be filled. And I think that that's something that I think U Squared does the best, is that not only does it help us create stronger ties with our community, but it gives people the space to reach out and say, here's what I need, and here's what we need. And a lot of times they don't feel like they have someone to represent them or someone who can help them find a way to fill the space. And I think that we do that really well with our own wants and needs, and also putting our feelers out and reaching out and saying, well, what do you need, and how do you feel we can help you?
Yeah, that's really profound, because I think that we are often sort of sitting with our own problems and feeling bad about them and not letting them outside our skin and being super private about it. And basically what you're saying is that this is a community of caring people that wants to know what you need. Yeah. As just a whole different way of living in community. instead of feeling like a failure,
Absolutely.
because you don't have a toothbrush or because your trash is overflowing with banana peels. That's really neat. I would just, let me ask you a question. If this, I don't know, I'm just going to throw it out to you. Some of this stuff is kind of heavy, some of these issues. And there's, I think, this sense among adults sometimes that, like, when you're young, you should just be having fun and don't worry about the world, just have a good time and enjoy your youth. And at some point, life will get really hard and you'll deal with it then, What do you have to say to that?
I think that there's absolutely something to be said about giving space for enjoyment, but also that, procrastination is bad. And if you leave everything to the last minute, it makes everything so much more stressful. And I think that something that needs to be addressed is that everyone can understand problems and everyone feels problems. And even if you don't have the words to express what you're feeling or seeing, everyone can see that and feel it. And I think that what's really important is that we make sure that if you feel overwhelmed and you feel that there's something you need to do about that, that we give you the space to do that. And if you think it's more productive for you to give space to your childhood and to leave it for a time when you feel better ready to accept it, then that's the best course of action, because, forcing anyone to be anything is so difficult to do, and it never works out. So, if that's who you are, then that's who you are. But I think a lot of people really, even when they're young, they want to make a change.
I totally agree with you. That's great. Okay, so here's a different question for you. What do you think are the biggest challenges that teens are facing these days? And is there something that we just kind of talked about it a little bit, but do you think, is there something that you think the world doesn't really understand about teenagers that it needs to understand better?
Very genuinely, I think it's very isolating. I think that teenagers are in a very interesting limbo space of, figuring out themselves and where they want to be, and also, the way that the world works. And having ways to figure that out is very helpful. And I think that as a teen and someone who knows lots of teens, I think that the thing that needs to be understood is that we're just trying. We're trying to figure it out, and you're trying to figure it out. And I think that it's much easier to figure everything out together and to include everyone in the conversations of the problems and the solutions, because as we all know, excluding one group of people, they're going to come and tell you what you did wrong. So it's much easier to figure out, well, how do we address a problem from all scopes and all aspects? And I think that that's the best thing that U Squared offers for teens.
That's wonderful. That's something I think about a lot, about how many decisions get made kind of behind closed doors, ostensibly for the benefit of other people, without actually bringing the people that you're trying to help into the conversation. And that's partly what this series is about. So I appreciate what you're saying there. Andre, we haven't heard from you yet, and I would love to hear about, first, just what was your project?
Yeah, so my project was Bus Pass Donations, a community care pop-up, and it was in February of 2021, so it was one of the first community care pop-ups that we did, and it was during kind of the height of COVID. And we ended up raising around 250 bus passes that we distributed to lots of community care centers like Franklin, and they were very grateful and showed their gratitude, and were able to distribute, I'm pretty sure, all of them within like the next month or so.
That's fantastic. And what does a bus pass get you?
So there's many different types. There were day passes, like certain amount of trips, so 10 trips, and it runs through CDTA, which goes all throughout Saratoga County. And especially during the winter months where people are, who are homeless, especially during COVID, maybe lost their jobs and had to sell a car to keep their houses or something like that. Offered transportation to jobs, like appointments, doctor's appointments, anything that was required travel, and they did not have the opportunity, and it wasn't able to. They weren't able to walk because of the snow and whatever conditions. It really like helped, like extend the reach to what they were able to do, and they weren't limited to a certain radius around there.
It sounds like it must have been incredibly helpful for people in a lot of ways. Wouldn't it be great if we had free public transportation?
Yes, that'd be amazing.
Wouldn't it be great if the buses went in more directions than they do right now?
Yeah.
That's really great. So let me just throw this more sort of philosophical question at you then. So what do you see as the really biggest challenges that teens are facing these days? And what do you want the world to understand about this time of life?
Yeah, so I would say some of the biggest challenges are mental health problems and mental health issues such as like depression and anxiety. And I feel like the world really misunderstands teens because they don't have an outlet most of the time to really like express what they're feeling and express what they want to. And so I feel like U Squared gives you that outlet. And like for me, before COVID, we were more of like, at least my experience, we were kind of approving other grants, and we weren't really, at least my experience, I was not really active in the community, whereas I was like I was passing things and I was helping others be involved, but I wasn't really involved. And during COVID, I feel like that opportunity kind of sprung up, and it allowed, because of whatever circumstance like other people were in, it really allowed us to become more active, and it gave us a pathway. And I feel like that's a really good thing, as we're able to express our feelings through social action and not like keep it inside, I guess.
Yeah, I know that for a lot of therapy programs, taking that final step of then reaching out and helping other people who are in the same situation is just like a really important part of healing, no doubt about it. And I think, there's so much mistrust among people, and like you talked about isolation and locking your doors and watching your stuff and like wondering if you're on the same side of the political fence and all of that kind of stuff. I think that really does a lot of injury to us over the course of time, and just reaching out and helping and being in community and showing trust and allowing people to show their better selves is, incredibly healing. That's wonderful. So let me ask you this. How do you know that what you're doing makes a difference in the world? How can you tell? Do you have a specific story that you could share?
Yeah, so I would go back again to the bus passes, and then also for the walk with Ukraine that Saiba had mentioned earlier. We used our grant money for that and bought I think around like 50 bus passes, and it was again during COVID, and we held the pop-up out a parking lot outside, and it was in February, so I wasn't really expecting a lot of, and also I was 15 at the time. I hadn't like heard a lot about like CDTA. I wasn't, obviously, I was privileged enough to have a car and I obviously wasn't driving, but I didn't have to take public transportation. I was able to walk. And so I didn't really know what it is before doing the research about it. And so I wasn't really expecting like a big outreach of people. And when we were able to gather over like 200 people, there's people coming by, stopping in, dropping off like 10, 5, 20 bus passes at a time. And then when we were able to go to all the centers and dropped them off, and they like showed like they really expressed their gratitude and like how thankful they were. It really like put into perspective, like you just helped 250 people like get transportation that they would otherwise not have had.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's like you might have essentially allowed somebody to hang on to a job, you know, get the mental health treatment that they needed, anything like that.
Yeah.
It's a profound impact. Yeah, that's wonderful. Ella, can you talk a little bit about how you know you're making a difference?
There was one specific event. I was a youth leader on a community care pop-up where we collected safety supplies for people in the community. This included fire extinguishers, fire detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, all critical things to having your home to make it a safe space, especially considering that carbon monoxide is odorless, and you really need those detectors in your house. And I did this community care pop-up. We also had hand sanitizer, which was very important during COVID. But we gathered so many detectors and so many fire detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. And at the end, like right before we were about to close, someone dropped off 15 boxes of hand sanitizer. And I loaded all the supplies into the trunk of my mom's car, and it didn't even fit in the trunk. And we had to drop it off and unload it. And just the sheer amount of supplies and how many homes that would make a safer space for families was incredible. It would probably supply fire detectors and carbon monoxide detectors alone. That would probably be like 30 plus houses. That would be more safe.
That's fantastic. I hope that they never get used, but that is wonderful. Bev, you want to add something?
I just want to congratulate these youth and other youth on the board too, because they have to do research, and Ella did research with Rebuilding Saratoga. She networked with Rebuilding Saratoga, researched what it is they needed for the homes they were helping. So that's where these supplies went. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I love the mix of science and heart that you bring into your projects.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful. So, Eliza, do you have any questions or maybe like a message or anything like that for people that are working in the nonprofit sector who make their careers there?
I think just as a message, I would say not to lose sight of like why you're doing it. And I think the most important part is not to push yourself to do everything. It's just to be able to find a group of people such as Youth Squared or whatever other group you're associated with. It's just find people that are like-minded and that you enjoy working with, and that will really inspire you to keep going and making a change.
Yeah, that is definitely insightful. I love the idea of like don't lose sight of why you're working so hard to get things done. And one thing that I've heard from a lot of people is that the way that they stay inspired is they touch the work. So in other words, like if they're at a community meal site that's putting on dinners for people, so that they have a place to eat, go out and sit down and just eat with people. Or here, like I can get stuck in the back office, like booking shows and, marketing the shows and coming up with the community programs. I forget to come out and actually listen to the music, so just actually touching the work and reminding yourself why you care is so important. That's great. Yeah. Saiba, do you have any advice along those lines?
Yeah, I would say a message is to definitely work with other groups, for sure. like we've worked with Franklin Community Center and Wellspring, and I feel like the pop-ups that we do with different groups really bring in a lot of people. Like it's always more than we expect, and bring in a lot of donations. Like for example, last year we did this blanket fundraiser where we donated blankets that we received to Franklin Community Center, and we expected maybe 100, and we ended up with well over 3 times that amount. So yeah, 450. Wow. Yeah. So just, yeah, networking is just really, really important.
That's fantastic. Yep. From the grant funders and donors on down to the people who are taking advantage of your services, they like to see organizations working together.
Yeah,
they really do, because everybody has some special talent or resource that they can bring to the table. And when you merge them, everybody gets stronger. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Well, good. So, hey, Bev, thanks for coming up with the idea for Youth Squared, because it's incredibly inspiring to see all the good that's being created.
It's really inspiring to me to see the impact and the pride that all of the youth have about being able to change the world. And I love, Eliza, what you said, you don't have to do everything,
Right.
but you can do something. And each of these people and more have really put forth effort to make the world be the change that they want it to be. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks for making time. I know you all are taking tests right now and on the home stretch. So good luck with the rest of school if you're not done yet. And thanks for making time to be here, and come out for a show anytime you feel like it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.